Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Indo Daily, where we're going to look back at all things politics from 2023 at home in Ireland, but also on the international stage. We're going to be handing out some political awards to those that we think were the movers and shakers of the year gone by. There'll be moments of inspiration, and there'll be some moments that TDs might like to forget. So over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to hand out some awards for Best Minister of the Year, Most Heated Debate in the Dáil during 2023, Biggest Gaff of the Year, and which TD has the most political rizz. We might even explain what that means. To do all that, I'm joined, of course, by our political team. We have Philip Ryan, Gabija Gataveckaite and Hugh O'Connell. Philip, let's start with Minister of the Year. Who is your pick?
Okay, so I went for Paschal Donohoe, who I suppose it's fair to say started off the year quite difficult. People might remember that he had this entire controversy about who paid for his election posters and did he properly declare them, and there was a whole hullabaloo about it. And one of his friends, a very important industry boss called Michael Stone, had to resign from various positions, and it was a whole controversy, and it started off pretty bad. But later into the year, he did manage to pass a budget with the first Fianna Fáil finance minister for more than 10 years, and it was a budget which the opposition weren't really able to pick any holes with. And then he went on towards, in recent weeks, being tipped to take over the IMF, which is pretty good year, you would say, or at least an end of year.
So in a year where he effectively had a demotion, you think he's coming out on top?
I think so. If you're being tipped for probably the biggest finance job in the entire planet, that's a pretty good job, and it seems that you're impressing the right people on an international stage, even if he's not doing it at home.
Speaking, Gabby, of people who got demotions this year, your top minister also took a step down.
Yes, but I think it was all to his benefit. Taoiseach Micheál Martin, as Taoiseach, he was sort of quite reserved. He was scared of saying the wrong thing, but I think he's done really, really well in the foreign affairs portfolio. And as the Taoiseach, he's been jetting around the globe. We saw him facing off the Israeli mayor when actually Philip was over on the trip in Israel, put in those difficult conversations, and the media was in the room, but I think he stared all that down. There were some rumblings of perhaps maybe a leadership heave in Fianna Fáil early on in the government. That's all kind of gone away now. And I think even in media appearances, he's just much more relaxed. He's much more freer to speak his mind, say what he actually thinks. When he was a Taoiseach and would have to do press conferences or doorsteps, he wasn't really great for giving a one-line zinger, but I think now he just feels much more relaxed. And actually, if you even see him around Leinster House, he's much more talkative, he's much more chatty, he's relaxed, he really enjoys what he's doing.
Is there
Micheál Martin zingers?
Zingers?
Yeah, there's a couple you'll find.
There was that joke, I think, was that Oliver Callan used to keep doing, that Leo was trying to be the co-Taoiseach. Micheál's kind of done that, but without trying. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, he's a true diplomat, and I saw that even when we had those riots in Dublin the morning after he came out. He had a press conference Dublin Castle actually right before Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, and he spoke in such an eloquent, diplomatic way, and he said, look, we'll have to watch what we're doing, we'll have to mind the way we're talking to one another. And I thought he does a really good job of capturing the mood of the nation. I think
I'm going to counterbalance this with one point, and you say the idea of a heave has stepped back somewhat, but Fianna Fáil are still doing pretty lousy in the polls.
Yeah, but they don't have any alternatives. And I think now they're actually happy with Micheál Martin. Whereas when they were having this conversation around, we had a few TDs that were maybe compiling lists of names to call on the party leader to resign.
Mark McSharry's not in Fianna Fáil
Mark
anymore.
McSharry was one of them. That's really kind of all gone away. And they see how well Micheál has done as Taoiseach. And, he did well as Taoiseach relatively, but they were very happy with his performance as Taoiseach, and so that's why all the talk of a heave is gone.
He's consistently the most popular party leader in the country, I think, which is quite a feat for someone who's a member of a party or the leader of a party that's flagging in the polls. He still outpolls Mary Lou McDonald, doesn't he?
But he's not your pick, Hugh. Who do you think
He's not my
better
pick.
year?
He might have been my pick if Gabby hadn't picked him first. But I think Heather Humphreys has continued to do a very good job in social protection and rural affairs. From a political perspective, she's doing all of the things that courts support from as wide a range of voters as possible. She's in rural affairs, which has grant schemes coming out the wazoo that can dole out money left, right and centre to schemes all over the country. In social protection, she's overseeing this huge spend in social protection in terms of double payments, autumn bonuses, Christmas bonuses, all of the kind of support schemes that are put in place, particularly when there's extreme weather events and floods and all that. And there's not a whiff of controversy about Heather Humphreys. There's no hint of, we talked about Pascal Donoghue earlier and the businessmen and the election posters and all of that. She's avoided all of that. She's transcended all of that. And I think it's a remarkable feat for someone who's been in cabinet now for nearly 10 years and is probably looking towards the future, potentially rumours of an Oireachtas bid in 2025 or perhaps a Fine Gael leadership bid.
Well, I would say one thing on Heather Humphreys, though, that she had a big decision to take in recent weeks and months around the Ukrainian welfare rates and around what do you do about the situation where we seem to become this gold mine for people fleeing wars, which in one way that's great, and the second way is that we're running out of accommodation. And it really seemed like she dithered and on that decision. And even this week, when the government did make a decision on this, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil were nowhere to be seen, and they pushed the Greens out there. They pushed Roderick O'Gorman, the Integration Minister, and Joe O'Brien to be front and centre. They go, these are the guys, we've made a tough decision now, and we want these guys to be the face of it. While Heather Humphreys was...
isn't that the great political skill?
It may be a great political skill.
Foist all of the pressure onto the Greens.
Make a big decision. You should front up and make the decision.
Absolutely.
And go look, I've done this, I've made it, and I'm going to be the face of it. I'm not going to put these poor unfortunate first-time TD and minister out there to take the flak for it.
But yet she did.
Well, I'm going to make the decision because you're the jury, but apparently I'm the judge in this scenario. And based on the debate there, I'm sorry, Hugh, but Philip has knocked Heather off the perch. I think you've knocked Pascal off the perch, but nobody has necessarily knocked Micheál off the perch. So I think he gets the Minister of the Year award.
Well done, Micheál.
Congratulations,
Gavi.
Yeah,
This is for you, Micheál.
The trophy's going to Cork.
a real honour. So I got Cork had to win something this year.
Yeah.
Spat of the Year, Philip, is our next category. And there are many in the Dáil especially, and where they have privilege and they can basically name call at will. What stood out for you?
Well, the one I put down is the most recent one there in the Dáil, and this is between the rural independents had a debate on immigration last week, and it was, a debate that was probably a long time coming. The rural independents put down a motion which was, you would say, some of the language was quite incendiary, talking about asylum tourism and talking about people coming, unvetted males coming over here, all the watchwords of possibly, you would say, the far right. But it was also a debate that probably really needs to happen, that we need to talk about immigration in this country and the impacts and what we can do capacity-wise and for the people who are living here and the people who are coming here as well. You don't want to become an asylum seeker here and you wander the streets. So, look, it went down to a debate. The independents had their say. They put out what they feel was their views. And in Ireland, the debate around immigration really is more focused on rural Ireland because you have these small communities that don't have a huge amount of services or infrastructure, and they are landed with all these people that they don't know too much about, and they're competing for services and infrastructure with. And one of the quid pro quos of living in rural Ireland is you have a different life to living in the city. You know your neighbours, you know everybody, you know yourself, you've lived there. So it's that kind of balance that the government hasn't really been able to strike. So in the middle of all that debate, Éan O'Riordan, Dublin TD, who lives out there in kind of Clontarf direction, jumps up and starts lambasting the Rural Alliance, saying the Rural Independents, saying that they're essentially trying to stoke racism or something like that. The Rural Independents, who include the likes of Michael Healy-Rae and Danny Healy-Rae and Matthew McGrath, who are never, you would consider, people who bite their tongue in the Dáil, jumped up. They called Éan O'Riordan a horrible little man. He's far from little, that's for sure. He's a big fella, but
he's very tall.
He is very tall.
He's as tall as me.
Yeah.
Part of the tall person's club in Leinster House.
So he jumps up, and there's a lot of shouting back and forth, and yeah, that's my spat of the year. Why, I don't know.
A proper...
You're not even backing your own nomination.
Well, it was a spat.
Okay, well, that can't win. That can't win.
it was a proper... it strikes me as you describe it, Philip, as a proper rural-urban fight.
It was, yeah.
Gabby, your nomination, I forgot about.
It's rural.
It's a rural versus rural.
Which is very rare. But it's also in a similar vein in that you also have Michael Collins, who's one of those independent TDs, who's also not afraid to speak his mind in the Dáil, versus Pippa Hackett, who is a senator actually, but she is in cabinet as a minister, and so she does take questions at times in the Dáil chamber, interestingly enough. And this is one of those spats that sometimes you might have Dáil on in the press room. You're watching it sort of, but it's not leaders' questions. It's not questions of promised legislation. It's not some hotly anticipated motion.
Something about biodiversity that you don't fully understand.
It's something that's run of the mill, and you have Dáil on. You're not really watching. You're probably making a few calls. And the next thing you know, there's a big row, and then the Ceann Comhairle says Dáil suspended. And this was one of those. Well, it was actually last Ceann Comhairle, like Catherine Connolly, who was in the chair at the time, but Michael Collins was having this debate, and Pippa Hackett accused him of being, shock horror, an organic farmer.
Ouch!
And Michael Collins said, well, you can only know that information because of your husband, because he would have inspected my farm. And of course, Minister Hackett was like, that's totally unfair comment to make. You've said it before. And there was a big argy-bargy, and Catherine Connolly had to suspend the Dáil because they were
Don't call a man an organic farmer.
Explain this to us. Did he not want people knowing he was an organic? Like, is that just uncool? What's the problem?
Well, I think if you look at the sort of things he advocates for, organic farming will probably not be one of them. So he felt very insulted by this personal information or private information, as he called it, being thrown across the Dáil floor. And it was unusual because Pippa Hackett as well is quite, she's quite reserved minister. She's in the Department of Agriculture. You wouldn't really see her having rows with anybody. But I thought it was great to have her standing up for herself, because of course he brought her husband and her personal life into it, and she didn't, she definitely fired back. So it was one of those rows that you definitely don't expect, but it's still quite entertaining to watch back.
A thing that's really interesting for me in this, I think when we would have done this in years previous, we would have had Micheál Martin versus Mary Lou, and we would have had Leo versus Mary Lou. But Hugh, I've consulted my cheat sheets again, and there's a trend because your nomination also involves the rural independents.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think on that, like, it's just, we've become so used to those spats between Leo and Mary Lou that they're not really very interesting anymore, because we both know kind of what they're going to say. So I've gone for the Danny Healy-Rae versus Thomas Pringle. So again, not unlike Gabby has described earlier, this is a situation where you're sitting in the office and you're doing other things, and then suddenly you hear people shouting in the Dáil. And in this instance, we had the F-bomb thrown out twice by Thomas Pringle in relation...
Organic farmer?
And it's rare enough we get the F-bomb in the Dáil. I think, one of the most famous ones, obviously, is FU Deputy Stag, Paul Gogarty at Emmett Stag over a decade ago. But in this instance, Thomas Pringle got up in the Dáil and he said, and Danny Healy-Rae was lecturing him about something, and he got up and said, if you just open your effing ears and shut your effing mouth for a minute, you'd hear what I have to say about this. And I just think that, so rare is it that we hear the F word in the Dáil that this is definitely my Dáil spot of the year.
Unparliamentary language.
Unparliamentary language, yeah.
And Thomas Pringle is so mild-mannered.
Well, that is the other thing.
One of the most, the nicest speaking voices.
One of the sort of more mild-mannered TDs, sort of giving one of the more loudmouth TDs an absolute dressing down in the Dáil. I mean, it was quite the moment, I think, because we hear a lot of bluster from Danny Healy-Rae. We don't really hear a lot from Thomas Pringle, but he has the capacity to unleash fury when he decides.
Well, I do love a bit of unparliamentary language. So when it came to picking the winner in this category, I also think that insult is one that you could, even leaving out the language, that idea of open your ears and shut your effing mouth. It's something we could all take and use, I think, on certain people in not in the newsroom or in present company. But so I'm giving the winner in this one, Hugh.
Fantastic.
It goes to you.
Brilliant.
Well done, Hugh. And Thomas.
Can't wait to tell Thomas.
Thomas Pringle, or does it go to Michael or Danny Healy?
They'll have to fight over it.
Yeah.
Philip, Gaff of the year, and there have been many over the past year, but you actually decided to pick one that was quite serious.
Yeah, this was the tweet, the big tweet of the year as far as Taoiseach Leo Varadkar is concerned, and as far as international diplomacy is concerned. And it is when Emily Hand, the young girl who was kidnapped by Hamas and kept captive for weeks on end, was eventually freed and brought back to her father Owen, who's an Irish citizen, of course, but lived in southern Israel. And Leo Varadkar, he put out a full statement. He emailed it out, and all the newsrooms got it. But he also put out a kind of wordy or poetic tweet where he talked about how Emily Hand had been lost and found. And look, the language was probably a little bit not facetious, but a little offhand and probably a little too flowery for the situation, given that it was a young girl kidnapped and held hostage by a terrorist organisation. And it didn't sit well with the Israeli community, and the Israeli foreign minister was quickly retweeted it and condemned it, and it caused a bit of an international incident between the two countries where tensions are already pretty high, and the Israelis don't see us as a huge friend internationally, and it's a bit of an issue. But at the same time, as we know, the Israelis are fighting a war in Gaza, but also fighting an information war. And anything like this and any kind of leeway you give them, they will jump on it and they will make an issue about it.
I was a bit torn on this one, I have to say, because when I initially saw it, I thought Israel were trying to take it out of context. You see the full statement and it was all fine. And then after a day or two, when you kind of see how it played out, you are kind of going, why are you doing diplomacy on X, formerly Twitter, at all? Well, it's just never going to end.
The issue is Twitter, X doesn't allow for nuance. And when you're putting statements out like that, and he didn't attach the statement, that's the other side of it. He just included that short paragraph as a small statement. You're leaving yourself open to these kind of attacks.
And that's the point. He left himself open to the criticism.
The thing we can say about that is it was ill-judged on his part, but equally the reaction was...
It was over the top,
top.
but I guess...
Reprimand the...
You know what you're...
But it was predictable as well.
Yeah, but like you say, Gabby, to call in the Irish ambassador to Israel for addressing...
Reprimander, yeah.
Over a tweet.
Over a tweet, yeah.
Well, they did bring Elon Musk.
Sorry, a post on X.
Over a tweet, so...
A post on X.
Post on X, yes, let's
X.
get it right. Gabby, you picked the same man for Gaff of the
In a
Year.
similar vein.
Well, actually, quite a different vein, I think.
Well, it's diplomacy vein as well, I guess, to an extent. It's Leo Varadkar. Of course, the Taoiseach makes his annual trip to America for St. Patrick's Day, but this was really just out of the blue stuff from Leo Varadkar. The Lewinsky reference in Washington, D.C. on Paddy's Day. He was at this... he was making a speech and he was talking about the Clinton presidency and how he was an intern in the White House in the last year of the presidency. And I'm going to read out exactly what he said. So he made a reference to, it was a time when some parents would have had cause for concern about what would happen to interns in Washington. I mean, obvious reference to, this affair that Bill Clinton had with Monica Lewinsky, which of course we know is probably one of the greatest scandals in all time of any American president who was in office.
I think our bar for that has probably changed in the years since.
Well,
at the time, it was certainly...
It's one of the great scandals.
Makes top five.
Top five. It's one of the great scandals for sure. And of course, Hillary Clinton was plagued with it.
Gabby's too young to remember Watergate, of course.
Well, I am very familiar with it.
Yeah, so are you.
Yeah, I know. Thanks pointing that out.
You're too young to remember this scandal, are you? The Monica Lewinsky, the Clinton one.
Well, just because I wasn't there for it doesn't mean I don't know anything about it.
I accept, of course.
I was like with Watergate. I actually was reading up on Watergate last night before I was actually struggling to fall asleep, and that's what I was reading up on. But anyway, really quite. He was reading a speech and he went off script and he said that, and people just went, what? And he did have to later apologise through his spokesperson.
That was very embarrassing.
There was no need to say it. He was probably trying to be funny. It wasn't very funny. I think to us, if you're not there, it's funny. But if you're in the room,
funny though, isn't it?
and if you're a US diplomat or you're kind of going...
Well, was the worst bit not that he had to go and meet Hillary Clinton only hours later?
Yeah.
But that's what makes... I think in and of itself, the joke was kind of funny, but the audience was not the audience to tell that joke.
It's the wrong audience, yeah, for sure. Wrong place, wrong time.
That's kind of a joke for the Lincoln Inn at, 2 a.m. on a Thursday, isn't it?
Why the Lincoln Inn?
I don't know. Is that not where Fine Gael had their Christmas party this year, lads?
US president.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. Good save. Hugh, is it going to be 3 out of 3 for Leo?
No, I've gone for probably one of the more niche gaffes of the year, which was in February in the Dáil when Kieran O'Donnell, Fine Gael Junior Housing Minister, forgot to oppose a bill tabled by People for Profit to extend the eviction ban So our listeners and our viewers might remember that at the beginning of the year, the whole debate around extending the eviction ban, or the government decision to let the eviction ban lapse, was hugely politically contentious, and there was a lot of back and forth over it. But here was an instance of a legislator incapable of doing the very basics of legislating, whereby the government position was obviously they wanted to let the eviction ban lapse. People before profit had tabled a bill to extend the ban, and the minister was asked at the end of the debate on the bill if he was opposing it, and he didn't respond. He was asked again and he didn't respond, and then it transpired that the bill had passed second stage. Was
he doing his Wordle, or what was he at?
I don't know.
He was new in the job.
He was new in the job, but it's pretty embarrassing.
He's a pretty experienced
Junior housing
chair of
minister.
the banking inquiry.
Junior housing. I think he was vice chair maybe. I don't. Yeah, but he. In any case, junior housing minister forgetting to advocate for government policy.
Yeah, housing minister.
Pretty embarrassing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he. So the bill passed second stage, but of course the eviction ban was allowed to lapse. It didn't really have any meaningful impact. But I just think it's a real gaffe for a government minister to be
A
incapable.
lot of stuff in Dáil, though, isn't it? Like a lot of stuff that they debate has no meaning.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's a very uplifting note about
that sounds like a different
parliamentary
video
processes.
slash podcast.
A
We
different
should do
podcast.
at some stage. Yeah. The Dáil, does it matter?
Speaking of, really meaningful, important things.
Who wins?
The winner, I think, of Gaff of the Year, for pure, it has to go to Leo Varadkar. I'm sorry, because he has two versus one, Hugh.
Kieran O'Donnell will be
Kieran O'Donnell.
trusted.
In the LinkedIn. Raging.
How are we going to explain this to him?
And I think, while I'm tempted to go with the Washington antics, I think for the seriousness of the diplomacy and the problem that he caused with that tweet, it has to go to Philip this time. But that also means, of course, that you're now on one each as we head into our final category. To just building up the jeopardy here now. And our final category, and I did not pick these categories, I should say.
Who did?
Garrett, our producer on the Indo Daily.
Name and shame.
And he's in my ear telling me he did it along with Philip. So the final competition is for politician with the most rizz award. Philip Ryan, do you want to start by explaining to us what rizz is?
I think Gabija is going to explain what rizz is. It was your
Charisma. That's it. It's so simple. It's nothing else, nothing more. Rizz is charisma, but you can also have certain kinds of rizz, as I'm sure we'll find out
The
now.
definition is quite broad.
But like
I think it's charisma.
It doesn't just come down to charisma, though.
But we should say that rizz is the Oxford Dictionary's
word of 2023.
Yeah.
It's a
And
young
it's-
person's word now.
Yeah, it's something that they're saying on Twitter or wherever. Or
X.
TikTok. One of them. It's that type of thing.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, so
explain it to us in action, Philip. Who has it?
okay, so who I have chosen for my politician with the most rizz of the year is Cottleberry TD, who is an independent from Kildare, and he is a new TD. He's only in the Dáil since the last election, but he's not unlike Thomas Pringle in that his delivery is just so much different in the Dáil, and even when he does media, than other politicians, whereby you're sitting there, you're watching leaders' questions, and you have your Pierce Doherty screaming their head off, you have your Richard Boyd Barrett screaming their head off, you might have them Patrick O'Donovan and the Fine Gael benches shouting his head off, and then it comes to Cottleberry, and he stands up and he's very measured. He does that approach of, if you speak quieter, people will listen harder, and he just puts his point across. It can be various topics, obviously, because he has a army background that he's very much on the way on. He contributes stuff around neutrality and the triple lock, but on other issues too. And I just think his delivery is just so much different, and he almost forces you to listen to his contributions with his strategy, and that's why he has rizz, if I understand rizz.
As I listen to you describe,
I'm not sure if that's rizz, but
That sounds like an anti-Riz.
yeah.
No. See, you don't
Rizz,
understand what Rizz is. He does for sure. I will say for sure he does have Rizz, because he is calm, and when he speaks to you, he's sort of very, very charming, and he's inviting, and that is charisma.
Or he puts you to sleep.
Nope.
No.
No, not at all.
No?
No.
Okay.
I'm just left wondering who is the Cottleberry of the politics team after listening to that, but I won't
I think
force an
we
answer.
need one. I think
don't-
that's
yeah.
we need
Did one exist? Yeah.
Gabija.
So my Rizz politician of the year is Minister of State Jack Chambers, who is a cabinet minister. He's
Minister
young-
sits at cabinet.
he's the
take it,
youngest
yeah.
at cabinet. But he has gone. He was sports minister to begin with, and then during the reshuffle, he got the Department of Transport. I think he's done a very good job in going from one department to another. I think when you speak to him, actually, he's very similar to Colin Berry in that he's cool, calm, and collected. Be it talking about Sinn Féin, he's very much so across his portfolio. I was watching the Oireachtas Transport Committee when he was before it a few weeks ago, and people were asking him like the most precise questions. Why is this stretch of road at Gaff's a certain, I think, is it 80 kilometres an hour, not 100 kilometres an hour? And he was able to say, well, there's slip roads coming off it and you have to slow down, you have to be careful. And this stretch of road is this way because of, and he was so across his brief. And it's rare to find a minister who knows the brief inside and out, especially when they haven't been there that long. It hasn't even, well, actually it's going to be a year now soon in a few weeks.
Nothing cooler than a minister who knows his brief.
So I think he's very good at his job. And I think a lot of people would think that he might be the future leader of Fianna Fáil. He's got, I think, a bit of work to do.
Oh, come on.
But he's also a doctor. So
He's a trained doctor. I don't think he's
He
ever...
doesn't hang on about like Leo Radgerd.
I was going to say, we've already
Well, yeah, that's
tried
a
the
good point,
doctor for
yeah.
Taoiseach thing.
yeah, but he's clever. That's the point. He's got, it all goes into the rizz. Yeah.
So when Micheál Martin decides to shuffle off to Europe or whatever it is, do you think Jack Chambers might be the next big thing in Fianna Fáil?
A contender. I mean, obviously there's Darragh O'Brien is in the mix, so is Michael McGrath. But like he's one of the young bloods that's very, Lisa Chambers is another one. Like she's very, very clever. Also think she has rizz. Like she's very dedicated, but I think the point of having rizz is that you're cool and you're able to deal with people.
Okay.
I'm almost lost for words.
On that point,
Hugh O'Connell.
because I've been coming under a lot of fire over this, particularly from you, but someone who's cool and able to deal with people and deal with issues. My nominee is David Cullinane, Sinn Féin Health spokesperson.
You're going to have to explain this.
Absolutely, no problem. David Cullinane is someone who's really sharpened up his image in the last year. I think anyone who looked at David Cullinane last year and David Cullinane this year will notice from an aesthetic point of view, sharper suits, crisper white shirts, ties,
No matter what they wear, Hugh.
fashion shoes
Fashion shoes.
that he once railed against Leo Varadkar for trying on.
Come on, Hugh.
David Cullinane has adopted the style and aesthetic of a politician preparing for government, and he has been extremely effective in pointing out some of the fallacies of the government's health budget. He's been a very effective opposition health spokesperson. I think he's probably Sinn Féin's best spokesperson on opposition issues, aside from Eoin O'Brien in housing, obviously. And I think he's really upped his game in the last 12 months.
So he has the drip, but does he have the rizz?
No. I think that is evidence alone of, going by Gabby's criteria of being cool, calm and collected and able to deal with people. I think David Cullinane has proven very effective in that over the
No more up the Ra chanting. Is that all gone?
Well, like,
Days
when's
are
the last
over?
time you heard David Cullinane say up the Ra? 3 years ago. When's the last time you heard David Cullinane railing against fashion shoes?
That's
3
called a
years ago.
glow up. That's called a glow
He's
up.
had a glow up, and I think as
not
a result,
rizz.
but it is rizz. He's
not.
demonstrated rizz. I
It's
think
not a glow up. What's a glow up?
Glow up when you glow up, so you no longer chant, for example, up the rat.
yeah.
But
also
you've
you
improved upon your
you dress sharper. You look the
dress
part.
sharper, you're better.
There's a guy who's preparing for government in a way that I think very few politicians, if any politician, is preparing for. You still see Eoin O'Brien going around in his smocks and his jeans and his Chelsea boots.
Not about what they wear.
You see David Cullinane dressing like a serious politician, and he has all the rizz. I think that makes him an outstanding candidate nominee for the award here.
This is terrible. And I notice as you describe all that, Hugh, that you're wearing socks with yellow submarines on them, which actually just makes it even worse.
Well, you're so wrong there. You're so wrong.
I
Anyway.
actually don't want to.
Well, I don't even know what kind of a sock is that.
I do-
Green and blue, and it's curled up at the top. It's
I
brown shoes.
I
Don't
don't.
wear brown around town.
Oh my God. Can we turn off Hugh's mic? It's done. I actually don't want to give it to any of you, but I have to.
Stop.
And based on the reaction that Hugh and Gabby had to Philip explaining how Colin Berry has rizz, I'm afraid that Philip is going to be the ultimate winner of this
Look,
year's
is
political.
Paul Berry not the winner?
There, come on.
Well, he's the winner of the
It's the
awards.
It's experience.
Yeah,
You're in time.
Before we wrap up though, on a more serious note, or maybe a lighter note, maybe each of you might give me your one prediction for 2024.
One prediction for 2024 will be a heave against Leo Varadkar.
Good shout.
Wow.
Good shout.
Post-European elections?
Post-European elections, yeah.
And who will launch it? I know I said one question, but I need more.
I don't know.
I'm into this now. Go on. Answer.
Tell in the future.
I think let's go with Simon Harris.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gabija.
Might be a stalking horse first though, so
I mean, I think it's a prediction many people have, but a general election. You know, where the government is telling us 2025, March 2025, the government expires. It'll probably be next year, and it'll probably be a winter election. I'd be very surprised if it was to happen in 2025, or if it was to happen any sooner. I think they're going to have their locals and their Europeans, and then they're going to go to the country a few months later.
Hugh?
Can I make three?
If you're brief.
Pascal Donoghue will go to the IMF, Michael McGrath will go to the European Commission, and Fine Gael will not win a seat in Dublin in the European elections. And that will precipitate the heave that Philip talks about.
Well, we shall play this all back to you this time next year. Well, we'll close it out there. That is our awards show for 2023. My thanks to our political experts, Philip, Gabija and Hugh, for bringing their rizz to the couch today. And stay tuned to the Indo Daily throughout 2024 to find out if any of their actual predictions happen. That is it for today, but the Indo Daily will be with you throughout the Christmas period. So stay tuned and don't forget to like, follow and leave us a review.